That ugly shop has to go. I'm parking here till you fix it.
That's what the HOA president screamed as she drove her pearl Mercedes straight into my open workshop bay. She slammed it in park 3 feet from my welding bench. I was at the hardware store buying flux when my 16-year-old daughter called. Brittany Cole Whitfield had kicked over a live MIG rig and was photographing my shop like she owned it. By the time I got home, my daughter had locked the bay door behind her. Brittany stood outside the gate, still pretending she had authority over a parcel that wasn't even in her HOA. That's the kind of woman she was, the kind who confused control for class and cruelty for leadership. What she didn't know was that my workshop had 4 cameras and 2 angles on her Mercedes. It also had a man inside who used to weld bridge plates for the United States Marines. Tell me, would you have called the cops or done what I did? 8 years ago, I bought a 2-acre parcel on the eastern edge of Niwot, Colorado, with the only money my late wife and I had ever saved together. Joanne had stage 3 breast cancer when we signed the deed. She died 11 months later in the upstairs bedroom of the house I built with my own hands. She made me promise 3 things before she passed: finish the workshop, raise Cassie like she was the most stubborn welder in the county, and never give up the land. I kept all 3. My name is Wesley Hartwell. I'm 47 years old, a former combat engineer with the Marines, and a custom metal fabricator. I weld trailer frames, gates, garden sculptures, and the occasional custom motorcycle part. The shop is a 30 by 50 steel building behind the house, and it smells the way every good shop should: hot iron, machine oil, and the faint sweetness of acetylene. My daughter Cassie is 16 now. She started welding the summer after her mother died, mostly because she couldn't sit still in a house that had suddenly gone quiet. Today she's better with a TIG torch than I was at her age, and she runs the front office of my business like a calm little drill sergeant. We live just outside the boundary of an HOA called Spruce Hollow Estates. Outside it, not inside it. The plat map drawn in 1987 is very clear about that line. Our parcel is unincorporated Boulder County land, and the only people with legal authority over what I do here are the county clerk, the county sheriff, and the planning department. Nobody told that to Brittany Cole Whitfield. Brittany is the president of Spruce Hollow Estates, and she has been for 9 years. She's 52, blonde, heavy-set in that way, that always carries a linen blazer over yoga pants like a uniform. She drives a pearl-white Mercedes GLS with a personalized plate that reads HOA President. Her husband, Drew, sits on the Boulder County Planning Commission. Together, they treat our subdivision the way feudal lords used to treat a peasant village. They collect tolls. They issue edicts. They decide whose fence is the wrong color. I met her for the first time at the mailbox cluster, a year after Joanne died. She introduced herself by handing me a welcome to the community packet for a community I didn't belong to. I tried to be polite. I told her my parcel wasn't part of her HOA. She smiled the way some people smile when they're already deciding to ignore you and said, "Oh, we consider the whole hollow our community." She made the word community sound like a leash. The next month, a violation notice appeared on my gate. The complaint was that my workshop produced industrial-grade noise that disturbed the aesthetic harmony of Spruce Hollow Estates. The fine was $200. The notice was on Spruce Hollow letterhead, signed by Brittany. I taped it inside my office wall and laughed. 3 weeks later, another one, then another. By the end of that first year, I had 11 of them. Each one was about something different: the corrugated metal roof, the forklift in the side yard, a pile of scrap I'd been organizing for a sculpture, the wedding band welds on a piece of fence Cassie had practiced on after school. I never paid a cent. Every notice went into a manila folder marked SH-HOA, the same way my Marine buddies used to organize after action reports. Joanne used to tease me about my filing habit. She said I treated paperwork like a religion. Turns out that habit was about to save my workshop, my livelihood, and possibly my daughter's future. I just didn't know it yet. The pattern got bolder in the second year. It was a Tuesday in late April when Brittany pulled into my driveway uninvited. I'd just lit a brazing rod when I heard the Mercedes door slam and her voice cut across the gravel like a circular saw hitting a nail. Wesley, we need to talk about your situation." She had a clipboard. The clipboard always meant trouble. She wore a salmon linen blazer and white slip-on sneakers that were already showing brake dust. and she walked into my open bay like she was inspecting a kitchen at a 4-star restaurant. "You can't be in here," I said. "It's an active workshop. There's slag on the floor." "I'm performing a community compliance walkthrough," she said, "on private property that isn't part of your community." She laughed at that. Actually laughed, like I'd said something charmingly stupid. Then she pulled out a typed letter on Spruce Hollow Estates letterhead and held it out as if it were a court order from God. "Cease and desist. You have 30 days to remove all commercial fabrication equipment from the premises, or the association will pursue legal action." I read it. I didn't say anything for a long moment. The brazing rod cooled on the bench. Then I walked her, gently, back through the bay door. I shut it behind us. I went into the office. I came back with a copy of my recorded deed and the 1987 plat map, both folded and creased from 100 prior arguments. I laid them on the hood of her Mercedes. "Read the boundary line, Brittany, the dotted one. You see this little notch where the road bends? That's the edge of your HOA. My property starts 10 feet east of that notch. It has never been inside Spruce Hollow Estates. Not in 1987, not in 1995, not now. You have no authority to issue a cease and desist." She squinted at the map for about 4 seconds. Then she folded her arms across the salmon blazer and said, "We consider the parcel functionally part of our jurisdiction." That was the first time I heard the phrase, functionally part of our jurisdiction. I would hear variations of it 63 more times over the next 2 years. "You consider it that way," I said. "The county doesn't." "You don't want to fight the association on this, Wesley. Drew sits on planning. Things can become very inconvenient very quickly." That was the first open threat. I filed it in my head the way I'd been trained to file an after-action note. Time of statement, 2:47 p.m. Witnesses, none. But I had a Ring camera on the porch eaves that picked up the audio perfectly. I checked it that night and saved the clip to 2 different drives. The next week, 3 sheriff's deputies showed up at 6 in the morning. Brittany had filed a noise complaint about my workshop operating commercial machinery before sunrise. The deputy on point was a tall man named Caleb Stearns, who I'd actually played softball with the previous summer. He looked at my unlit shop, the cold welder, my coffee cup still steaming on the porch rail, and exhaled through his nose. "Wes, I'm going to level with you," he said. "This is the 3rd call she's made about you this month. None of them have checked out. But once a complaint is filed, I'm required to roll on it." "I know. You might want to start documenting." "I already am." He smiled a little. He'd seen the type before. He told me, off the record, that the department had unofficially flagged Brittany's calls as habitual. He also told me, off the record, that wouldn't stop her. 3 days later, I came home from a hardware run to find a Spruce Hollow Estates sticker plastered across the front of my gate sign. Big yellow letters, violation, unauthorized commercial activity. The sticker was glued so hard with industrial adhesive that it took me an hour with acetone and a razor blade to remove. Cassie watched me from the porch with that quiet, focused look she gets when she's deciding to remember something. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, sweetheart. She's going to keep doing this, isn't she?" I dropped the last shred of yellow vinyl into a 5-gallon bucket and capped the lid. "Yes," I said, "she is. What are we going to do?" I looked at her. 16 years old, blue welding goggles pushed up on her forehead, her mother's same stubborn jaw. "We're going to keep every single one," I said, "and we're going to wait." The waiting got harder in year 3. By then, I had 41 violation notices in my SHOA folder. None of them had ever been ruled valid by the county. Brittany didn't care. She was playing a different game. She was playing for fatigue. That summer, she pivoted to a new tactic. She started warning my customers off. The first I heard of it was from a longtime client named Hal Vickers, a retired rancher out near Hygiene who'd ordered a custom gate for his property line. Hal called me on a Friday afternoon, his voice sandpapered with awkwardness. "Wes, I had a strange visit from a lady this morning. Said her name was Brittany something, and she's the HOA president out by your shop. She said she felt obligated to let me know there's an ongoing safety investigation into your workshop, and that any orders placed with you might be subject to seizure as evidence." I closed my eyes. My fingers found the edge of the bench. The metal was cool. I made myself breathe. "Hal, I want you to know 2 things. First, there is no investigation. Second, she has no jurisdiction over my property. She's lying to drive my business under." Hal was quiet for a minute. Then he said, "Son," I figured, I've known 3 women like her in my life, and they all ended the same way. Fence posts deep in their own hole. You finish my gate, I'll pay you cash up front. And if you need somebody to swear out an affidavit about what she told me, you let me know. I'll let you know. I hung up and stared at the wall for a full minute before I could move. Cassie came in. She'd heard the tone. She sat on the corner of my desk and said nothing, just waited. She's going after my customers now, I said. Like a coward, Cassie said. Like a coward. Over the next 2 months, 4 more clients got the same visit. 2 stuck with me. 2 quietly canceled their orders. I watched my June revenue drop 40%. I started skipping lunches to keep the bills paid. I sold a vintage cherry red, 1968, Norton motorcycle that Joanne and I had restored together. Sold it to a collector in Fort Collins for $9,000. The alternative was missing a payment on Cassie's college savings account. That sale hurt in a way that doesn't have a clean name. I drove home from Fort Collins with empty hands and a cashier's check in my pocket, and the smell of WD-40 stuck to my fingers the whole way. A week after that, Brittany escalated again. She showed up at my gate with a man in a navy polo who introduced himself as a compliance inspector with the Boulder Foothills Community Safety Authority. That isn't a real agency. I checked 12 hours later. The agency was a private LLC registered to the same shell consulting firm that filed her HOA paperwork. He had a badge that he'd ordered off Amazon for $38. He demanded to inspect my shop for fire code violations. I asked for his certification number. He didn't have one. I asked for the warrant. He didn't have one. I asked him to leave. He didn't, until I picked up my phone and dialed the actual Boulder County Sheriff while standing in front of him on my own driveway. Then he and Brittany hustled back to her Mercedes like raccoons hit by a porch light. The deputy who came out, again Caleb, took one look at the fake badge photographed on my Ring camera and shook his head slowly. "Wes," he said, "I'm going to level with you again. The department can't act on individual incidents like this without a pattern complaint. But if you build a pattern, we can build a case." How big a pattern? 20 solid incidents documented minimum. Photos, timestamps, witnesses, the works. I went inside and counted my folder. 43. I went back out and told him I'd be ready when he was. That night, Cassie set the table while I welded a new hinge on the front gate. The sun was setting through the cottonwoods, and the gold light caught the grinding sparks like fireflies coming home. She didn't ask me about the Norton. She knew. She just brought me a glass of cold water and stood beside me until the hinge cooled. "Dad," she said. "Yeah. You should start writing this down, like all of it, not just the notices, everything she says, everything she does." I looked at my 16-year-old daughter and thought, my God, your mother would be so proud. "You're right," I said. "I will." I started a yellow legal pad that night, and I never stopped. Year 4 was the year she touched the gate. I had reinforced it twice by then. The Norton money paid for the steel. I bolted 3/8-inch plate across the gate face, installed a coated keypad, and ran the camera system through a battery backup so even a power cut couldn't blind it. The shop got the same treatment. 4 cameras outside, 2 inside, every angle saved to local storage and to the cloud. Brittany must have seen the upgrades, because the next month she shifted tactics again. This time, she didn't come herself. She sent 2 men. It was a Wednesday in October. The aspens up on the foothill behind the property were the color of new copper, and the smell of wood smoke from the McConnell place down the road had been drifting across the field all morning. I was in town picking up an order of stainless rod when Cassie called. "Dad," she said. Her voice was very level. "2 men just pulled up to the gate. They have bolt cutters. They're saying they're here on HOA orders." My truck was 3 miles out. I turned around. "Stay inside the house," I said. "Lock the doors. Record everything from the window. Do not engage them." "I won't." "I love you." "I love you too. Drive safe." I made it home in 5 minutes. By then they'd cut through my outer keypad housing and were starting on the steel plate. They were 2 men in their 30s, work boots and oil-stained jeans, neither one looking entirely sure of why he was there. I rolled my window down before I hit the brake. "Gentlemen, step away from the gate. Now." They turned. The bigger one, red-bearded, lowered the bolt cutters. "We were told this property had a court order for gate removal. HOA hired us." "You were told a lie. This property is not part of any HOA. I have it on recorded deed. You are committing criminal property destruction." The smaller one paled visibly. The bigger one frowned. "We got a work order, says right here." He held up a tablet. The screen showed a fake order on Spruce Hollow Estates letterhead, the signature line blank where a court signature should have been. "That document is forged," I said. I kept my voice flat, the way I used to talk down young Marines about to make a bad decision. "I am going to call the sheriff in approximately 30 seconds. If you are still here when I do, you become defendants. If you leave now, you stay witnesses. I have video of everything you've done so far, and I'm willing to share that video with your employer, your defense attorney, or both. Your call." They didn't even argue. They threw the bolt cutters in the back of their truck and were gone in under 90 seconds. I got a clean license plate, a clean shot of both faces, and audio of the bigger man saying on camera, "Yeah, the HOA lady hired us. Brittany said it was a compliance job." I stood there a long time after they pulled away. Cassie came out of the house. She stopped about 10 feet from me and stood, hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets, looking at the cut housing and the scuff marks on the plate. The sun behind her made her hair shine the same red as her mother's. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah." They cut Mom's gate. I had welded that gate the year after Joanne died. Her initials, JLH, were tucked behind the lower hinge so you couldn't see them unless you were lying on your back in the gravel looking up. Cassie knew about them. Brittany did not. "It's just steel," I said quietly. "We can fix steel." But something turned over in my chest. Not anger, not even outrage. More like the quiet click of a tumbler in a lock falling into place. I called Caleb. He showed up 45 minutes later. He watched the footage twice. He looked at the cut housing, the fake work order I'd photographed off the tablet, the audio recording. He sighed the long sigh of a man who has seen far too much human stupidity dressed up as authority. "Wes," he said, "I think you might have what we need." "I know I do." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to file the complaint, and then I'm going to start asking questions about how she's funded." He raised an eyebrow. "Brittany doesn't have a job," I said. "Drew makes maybe $90,000 at the county. They drive match Mercedes and just put in a heated pool. Where's the money coming from?" Caleb looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Wes, I'd love to see what you find." That weekend, I drove to the Boulder County Clerk's office and filed my first formal records request. The records request changed everything. Public records requests in Colorado are governed by the Colorado Open Records Act, the CORA. Most counties have to respond within 3 working days. Most people don't bother to ask. Most HOA presidents who skim a little money on the side count on the fact that nobody is ever going to look. If you ever suspect a small town official is dirty, here's the takeaway worth keeping. The paperwork they have to file is almost always public, and almost nobody ever reads it. I asked for 3 things. 1. Every recorded compliance fee Spruce Hollow Estates had collected in the last 8 years, with attached invoices. 2. Every approved boundary expansion ever filed by Spruce Hollow Estates, with the county acknowledgement. 3. Any vendor contracts the HOA had with a consulting firm called Wildflower Strategy LLC, which I had noticed appeared at the bottom of every official notice Brittany had ever sent me, printed so small I'd missed it for 3 full years. The clerk, a friendly woman named Eileen Brooks, who'd been on the job since the Clinton administration, raised an eyebrow at the 3rd one. "Wildflower Strategy," she said. "Drew Cole Whitfield's name comes up on that filing." "Pardon?" "It's registered to him, sole member LLC, filed in 2016. I felt that quiet tumbler click again. The records came back 6 days later. I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee, the box of paper across my knees, and started reading. Here is what I found. The HOA had collected approximately $312,000 in compliance fees over 8 years. Roughly $207,000 of that had been paid out to Wildflower Strategy LLC for consulting services. Wildflower Strategy LLC was registered to Drew Cole Whitfield, husband of Brittany Cole Whitfield, HOA president. Drew sat on the Boulder County Planning Commission, the same body that approved any expansion the HOA tried to claim. There was never a boundary expansion filing on the books, not one. The 1987 plat had never been amended. That meant every expanded jurisdiction violation notice Brittany had issued, to me and to at least 19 other non-HOA homeowners I would later identify, had been issued without legal authority. Every fee collected on that authority was, at minimum, conversion under Colorado civil law. At worst, it was a coordinated embezzlement scheme using a fictitious jurisdiction as cover. And every dollar of it had been laundered through her husband's shell, LLC, contracted by an HOA she chaired, signed off by a planning commission he sat on. I sat on that porch a long time. The coffee got cold. The cottonwoods rustled. Somewhere down the road, a chainsaw started up and stopped. I finally got up and walked back to the shop. Cassie was in the bay running a TIG bead on a brake pedal mount for a customer. She looked up when she heard me come in. She killed the torch. Dad. I found it. How bad? 300 grand, 8 years, 20 homes, her husband's shell company. Cassie set down the torch. Her welding hood flipped up. Her eyes, Joanne's eyes, held mine. What do we do? She said. We don't move yet. She doesn't know we know. If we move too early, Drew warns her, they shred records and the case evaporates. So we wait. We wait and we build. She nodded, slowly, then she said something I have replayed in my head ever since. Mom would have loved this. I laughed. It came out a little wet around the edges. Yeah, I said. She would have. Joanne had been a paralegal for 16 years before the cancer. She would have read every page of those records over coffee and circled the parts that mattered with a red pen. She would have known exactly what to do. Now her daughter and I were going to do it for her. The next 8 months were the quietest of my adult life. I did 3 things in that time. I built a case, I built a structure, and I built a community. The case came first. I scanned every violation notice into a single binder, organized chronologically, cross-indexed to the audio and video clips that backed each one. I drove out and visited every non-HOA landowner whose name appeared on a Spruce Hollow compliance invoice. There were 19 of them. 16 still lived in the area. 12 had paid Brittany at some point, mostly in amounts between $200 and $800, because they were either intimidated or just tired. 2 had been driven entirely out of their homes by her noise and code campaigns and were renting in Longmont. I took statements from every one of them. Joanne's old paralegal habits surfaced as I worked. I made each witness sign and date their statement, attached photographs, and tagged everything in a master index. If you ever go after someone like Brittany, here's a thing worth knowing. A single complaint is a grievance. 20 parallel complaints, signed and dated, is a pattern. Patterns are what move district attorneys. The structure came second. I retained an attorney out of Longmont named Pamela Whitcomb, an older woman with a gray bob and the unhurried smile of someone who had once worked civil rights cases in the 70s and never quite stopped. She read my binder in 3 hours and called me back the same afternoon. Mr. Hartwell, she said, this is the cleanest civil RICO predicate I have read in a decade. I'd like to take it on contingency. What does that mean for the criminal side? The criminal side is the district attorney's call, but I have a friend in that office who would, I suspect, find this very interesting if it landed on her desk. Make the call. She did. Meanwhile, I started reinforcing the shop, not aggressively, just enough. I rebuilt the gate with a code-activated steel crossbar, the kind that has to be retracted before the gate can swing. I doubled the cameras inside the workshop, including one on the main bay door that pointed into the shop, in case anyone ever tried to enter while I was gone. I installed a clean MIG setup near the front of the bay, a setup that, if you didn't know better, looked like it had been left in mid-job. The truth was that it was bait, the sort of detail my old commanding officer used to call a tripwire of opportunity. I never explained to anyone why I left it there. I just kept it there. Cassie and I welded together every Saturday that winter. She was working on a piece, a wrought iron sculpture of a horse rearing for the regional youth metal art competition. The horse was nearly 4 feet tall. She had been working on it for a year. The detail in the mane alone took her 70 hours. I have never been more grateful for any 70 hours of my life. The community came third. I started inviting the other non-HOA landowners over on Sunday afternoons. We sat on the porch and we talked. We were not, any of us, particularly political people. We were retired ranchers, a small engine mechanic, 2 school teachers, a woman who restored antique pianos, and a Vietnam veteran who farmed honey. What we had in common was that Brittany Cole Whitfield had pretended to govern us for years. We compared notes. We compared invoices. We compared the small humiliations she had inflicted, one envelope at a time. By February, I had not only 19 statements, but a coalition. We named ourselves, half-jokingly, the East Hollow Owners Association. We elected the Vietnam veteran, a quiet man named Earl Pendergast, as our chairperson. We started a shared file. We started a small monthly potluck. None of this was illegal. None of it was even adversarial. It was, on its face, neighbors getting to know each other. But it gave us a structure, and it gave us solidarity. In late March, Pamela called me. The Boulder County DA's office had reviewed the materials. They had quietly opened an investigation into Wildflower Strategy, LLC, and Spruce Hollow Estates compliance fees. They asked us to sit on the information and keep doing exactly what we were doing. How long? I asked. 60 to 90 days, Pamela said. They want a clean predicate. Don't tip her off. I won't. I hung up the phone. The shop was quiet. Cassie was sitting on the bay step, sanding the horse's hoof. The sun was warm on the gravel. The whole property smelled like cut iron and pine. I went outside, sat down on the step next to my daughter, and said nothing. She didn't ask. She just handed me a piece of sandpaper. Brittany sensed the silence. Predators almost always do. They get suspicious when the prey stops twitching. By April, she could see that I had stopped responding to her notices, that her violation stickers were being calmly removed and filed without protest, that 2 of her favorite intimidation tools had simply stopped producing the reactions she had built her authority on. She didn't know about the records request. She didn't know about Pamela. She didn't know about Earl. But she knew, the way an old shark knows a current has shifted, that something was wrong. So she escalated, hard. The first move was social. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, the one Drew managed as moderator, a long, careful, plausible-sounding statement of concern. It accused me by name of operating an unlicensed industrial hot work facility within 500 feet of family homes. It described my workshop as a fire hazard and a potential explosive risk. It implied, without quite saying, that Cassie was being raised in an unsafe environment by a mentally unwell veteran. That last part was underlined. The post was shared 492 times in 3 days. I did not respond to it. Pamela had told me not to. The post went into the binder. The second move was bureaucratic. She filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment alleging illegal hazardous waste storage at my shop. CDPHE sent an inspector out within a week. The inspector was a woman in her 60s named Lana Brock, who had been doing the job since the 80s and could spot a frivolous complaint from a county away. She walked my shop, looked at my labeled, dated, properly stored containers, looked at my OSHA placards, looked at the spotless floor Cassie had mopped 3 days earlier, and said, "Mr. Hartwell, I'm filing this as unfounded. Whoever sent this in has done it before, hasn't she?" Yes, ma'am. She wrote me a courtesy copy of the unfounded finding and added, off the books, a comment that CDPHE was beginning to track Brittany's complaint pattern across multiple homeowners. That copy went into the binder too. The third move was where she crossed a line that no parent ever forgets. On the morning of April 17th, a Boulder County social worker named Teresa Halliburton knocked on my door. She was holding an iPad and looked deeply uncomfortable. She explained gently that a report had been filed alleging that my 16-year-old daughter was being exposed to dangerous industrial chemicals and engaging in unsupervised heavy machinery operation, and that Cassie had been observed working barefoot near welding equipment. Cassie has never welded barefoot in her life. She has a pair of steel-toed Wesco boots she saved up 6 months to buy and treats like an heirloom. Teresa wanted to interview Cassie. Cassie agreed. She walked Teresa through the shop, point by point, explaining her PPE rituals, her welding logbook, her American Welding Society junior certification. Yes, that is a real thing. Cassie earned hers at 15, and her competition schedule. She showed Teresa the locked chemical cabinet, the eye wash station, the fire suppression system, the certified ventilation hood. She showed her the framed photo of Joanne on the office wall and explained, calmly, why she had started welding. Teresa closed her notebook a quarter of the way through. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, "I am required to follow up on every report, but I want you to know, on the record, that this report was, in my professional judgment, malicious. I'm going to mark it as such in my final assessment. Whoever filed this against you and your daughter abused a process that exists to protect actual children in actual danger." She gave us her direct line. She told us to call if anything else happened. She left. I stood on the porch and watched her drive away. Cassie came out and stood next to me. She was very still. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." "She tried to take me away from you." I couldn't speak for a moment. "Yes," I said finally. "She tried. I want to be there when it ends." "You will be?" "Promise." "I promise." That night I called Pamela. I told her about the CPS report. I told her about Teresa Halliburton's statement. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Wesley," she said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. The DA's office has just completed their pre-charging review. They have enough." "Enough for what?" "Enough to indict on 6 counts. Theft, conspiracy to commit theft, filing false reports, attempted intimidation of a witness, 2 counts of forgery. They want 1 more documented incident, anything fresh, anything new, to lock in the timeline. After that, they'll move." "How long?" "As long as it takes for her to do 1 more stupid thing." I looked at Cassie across the kitchen. She had heard. "Pamela," I said. "She always does." It happened on a Friday in early May. Cassie was in the shop. I was 20 minutes away at the hardware store in Longmont, buying a fresh tank of argon and a box of welding tips. The bay door was open because Cassie was finishing the patina on her horse sculpture, which required a south breeze to evaporate the chemical evenly. The horse stood on a wooden plinth at the center of the bay, hooves planted, mane lifted, eyes raised, 57 pounds of hand-formed wrought iron that represented 1 year of her young life. I would learn the rest of the story from cameras, from Cassie, and from Brittany's own mouth. At 11:47 a.m., a pearl-white Mercedes GLS came up my driveway. The gate was open because I had been moving steel earlier and hadn't reset the bar. The Mercedes slowed at the gate. Brittany leaned out the driver's window, looked at the shop, saw the bay door open, saw Cassie alone inside, and made a decision. She drove the Mercedes straight into the workshop. She didn't stop at the bay opening. She rolled the SUV all the way in, parked it 3 feet from my welding bench, and shut off the engine. She got out. She tossed her purse on the bench, knocking a roll of welding wire onto the floor. She walked to the patina-soaked horse, looked it up and down, and said audibly on camera, "This whole place is a violation." Cassie was standing 5 feet behind her, holding a soft brush in one hand. "Ma'am," Cassie said, "you can't be in here." Brittany turned. She saw Cassie. Her face went through 3 expressions in quick succession: surprise, calculation, then a kind of sharp, mean delight. "Oh," she said, "you, the little welding princess. Where's your father, sweetheart?" "He's not home. Please leave." Brittany ignored her. She walked deeper into the shop. She started photographing the chemical cabinet, the MIG bait set up near the front, the rack of finished gates waiting for pickup. She kicked a coil of TIG filler rod with the toe of her sneaker, then deliberately kicked over the live MIG welder I had left in the front of the bay. The welder fell sideways. The wire feed jammed. The tip sparked once against the concrete, and a thin curl of smoke rose. Cassie was already moving, not toward Brittany, toward the wall. "You can't operate this kind of equipment without proper..." Cassie hit the bay door button. The bay door is a 15-foot rolling steel panel on a chain drive. It takes 19 seconds to come all the way down. Brittany heard the chain start. She turned. Her face shifted into a 4th expression: confusion, then anger. "What are you doing? Stop that." Cassie didn't say anything. She walked to the side door, the one that exits into the back of the shop and out toward the house. She stepped through. She locked it behind her. She locked the front office door. She locked the rear bay door. She walked into the kitchen, picked up her phone, and called me. "Is Dad?" "What's wrong?" "Brittany's locked in the shop. She drove the Mercedes inside. She kicked over the MIG. I missed the exit ramp. I had to take the next one and double back. By the time I pulled into the driveway, 26 minutes later, the Mercedes was still inside, the bay was sealed, and Brittany, I could hear her, was pounding on the inside of the steel panel like an animal in a trap. Cassie was on the front porch with her arms folded, watching the shop like a cat watching a mousetrap she had personally set. I parked, I got out, I walked up to the porch. "Are you okay?" I said. "I'm fine." "Show me the footage." She had already pulled it up on her phone. We watched the whole thing, the Mercedes rolling into the bay, the kicked welder, the threats to Cassie, the moment my 16-year-old daughter had calmly walked to the wall and pressed the button that closed the trap. "Cassie." "What?" You did the right thing. I know. I walked slowly around to the side door of the shop. I could hear Brittany on the other side, threatening lawsuits, threatening the sheriff, threatening her husband, threatening Drew's planning commission seat. I did not open the door. I called Pamela. I told her exactly what had happened. There was a long silence, and then, for the first time in 8 months, I heard my attorney laugh. "Wesley," she said, "she just gave us the last predicate." "Pamela," I said, "I'm not calling the sheriff yet." "Why not?" I looked through the side window of the shop. I could see between the boxes the pearl flank of the Mercedes. I could see the welding bench. I could see my tools. "Because," I said, "I think it's time we talked about evidence preservation. What I did over the next 90 minutes will be argued about in Boulder County for the next 10 years. Pamela has explained it twice in deposition. I will explain it here exactly as it happened. I called the sheriff's department. I asked specifically for Caleb Stearns. I told him there had been a criminal trespass at my shop and a forcible entry of the curtilage by a passenger vehicle, and that the suspect was currently inside my secured workshop and refusing to leave. He asked if anyone was hurt. I said no. He said he would be there in 20 minutes with backup. He asked me not to engage further. I told him I would not. Then I went into the shop through the side door. I did not approach Brittany. She was sitting in the driver's seat of her Mercedes on her phone, screaming at someone. I would later learn it was Drew, about how I had kidnapped her vehicle. She did not see me. The shop is large and full of stacked materials, and I moved quietly along the back wall. I did 3 things in those minutes. I retrieved my professional camera and photographed every angle of the scene: the Mercedes inside the workshop, the kicked-over MIG welder, Brittany's purse on my bench, the patina supplies on the horse, the bay door sealed. I retrieved my arc welder and 4 3/8-inch steel plates, each cut to the dimensions of a Mercedes door seam, and I made a single decision that Pamela would later describe in court as creative, lawful, and deeply ill-advised, but creative. I welded the steel plates over the door seams of her Mercedes, front and rear, all 4 doors. I used thin tack welds on the plates only, not on the paint, not on the metal of the car itself. The plates clamped over the seams. They did not touch the body panels. They could be removed in 20 minutes by any certified torch operator without ever marking the vehicle. But they could not be opened by a Mercedes Cole Whitfield with a key fob. The whole time, Brittany sat inside the car, on her phone, with the windows rolled up, screaming at Drew. She never looked back. When I was done, I taped a single piece of paper to the inside of the driver's window. It read, "This vehicle is being preserved as material evidence pursuant to civil complaint and pending criminal investigation. Please contact the Boulder County Sheriff's Office before attempting removal. Wesley T. Hartwell." I walked out. I locked the side door behind me. Caleb arrived 11 minutes later with 2 deputies and a body camera. I walked him through the footage. I walked him through the binder. I walked him through Cassie's call, the timeline, the welded plates, the careful protection of the paint. I gave him a signed sworn statement. I gave him Pamela's number. I gave him 8 years of records. Caleb watched all of it. Then he looked at the welded Mercedes through the shop window. Then he looked back at me. Then he said, very quietly, "Wesley, you magnificent son of a gun. Am I in trouble? You weren't supposed to do what you did, but the plates didn't damage the car. The car damaged your equipment. She drove that thing into your shop, and she's still sitting in it. I'm going to take my daughter camping for 3 days," I said. "I'm taking her up to a fishing cabin in the Poudre Canyon. I'll be unreachable. I want everything that needs to happen without us." Caleb tilted his head. "You're going to vanish," he said. "For 72 hours, while the Mercedes sits in your shop welded shut. With your permission." Caleb looked back at the shop. He looked at the sky. He took a deep breath. "Wes," he said, "if anybody asks, I told you to leave for your daughter's safety. I'll preserve the scene. We'll get an evidence team out here. The DA's office is already on standby for the indictment. Go, take her, get some sleep." I took Cassie, I drove. We packed in 20 minutes. We were in the Poudre Canyon by sundown. The Mercedes stayed where it was. What happened in the next 3 days, I learned mostly from the news. The story broke Saturday morning on the front page of the Daily Camera, with a photograph of a pearl white Mercedes welded inside a private workshop. By Saturday afternoon, it had been picked up by Channel 9. By Sunday, the DA had filed indictments. Brittany on 7 counts, Drew on 4. By Monday, Drew had been suspended from the Planning Commission, and Wildflower Strategy LLC had been administratively dissolved. Brittany sat in a county holding cell for 41 hours before her bond was set. The Mercedes was cut free at 9:14 a.m. on Tuesday by 2 certified torch operators under the supervision of 3 deputies, an evidence tech, 2 attorneys, and a Channel 9 cameraman. Not a single panel of paint was damaged. When Cassie and I drove back down out of the canyon on Tuesday afternoon, the gravel at the foot of my driveway was lined with parked cars. I will admit, my first thought was that something else had gone wrong. Earl Pendergast met me at the gate. He had his Vietnam veteran cap pulled low against the sun, and a smile I had not seen on his face in 3 years. "That's Wes," he said. "We've been waiting for you." It wasn't a media crowd. The reporters had come and gone. This was the East Hollow Owners Association, all 19 of us, plus a few new faces, neighbors I hadn't even met yet, folks who had heard the story and wanted to shake my hand. Hal Vickers was there, the honey farming Vietnam vet, the piano restorer with paint on her knuckles, Lana Brock from CDPHE, off the clock, Teresa Halliburton, the social worker, in jeans and a Rockies cap. Cassie hopped out of the truck. She looked at the gathering. She looked at me. "Dad," she said, "is this for us?" I think it might be. The settlement, in the end, was not the part of the story I remember most. Brittany pled to 4 counts and served 18 months in a women's correctional facility in Canyon City. Drew lost his planning seat, lost his consulting LLC, and now sells insurance out of an office near the Pearl Street Mall. The HOA was restructured under court-appointed receivership and bylaws that explicitly bar any expanded jurisdiction claims. The compliance fees were ordered returned to every homeowner who had been billed. My share alone, between civil settlement and recovered fees, came to a little over $240,000. I gave most of it away. Cassie and I sat down at the kitchen table the week after the receiver's order. We talked for 3 hours. Then we drove down to Niwot High School and met with the principal, a tired and kind man named Hector Marsh, and we proposed something. We called it the Joanne Hartwell Trade Scholarship. It funds full tuition, certification fees, equipment, and PPE for 2 female students each year at the Boulder County Trade School. Welding, machining, electrical, plumbing, automotive. 2 girls, every year, for at least the next 20 years. The first scholarship was awarded the following May. The recipient was a 17-year-old named Marisol Buchanan, who wanted to learn diesel mechanics because her mother drove a long-haul rig, and she wanted to ride along someday. She cried when she opened the envelope. I cried watching her. Cassie won the Regional Youth Metal Art Competition with her wrought iron horse. She is now 18, in her 2nd year at Colorado School of Mines, studying materials engineering, and she still runs my office on weekends like the calm little drill sergeant she has always been. I still weld every day. The shop is still standing. The gate has Joanne's initials behind the lower hinge. The cottonwoods still rustle. A few weeks ago, on a Sunday afternoon, the East Hollow Owners Association met for our quarterly potluck. Earl brought venison chili. The piano restorer brought cornbread baked in a cast-iron pan that had belonged to her grandmother. Teresa Halliburton brought her 2 daughters. We sat on my porch and we ate and we laughed, and we watched the light turn copper on the foothill behind the shop. Cassie sat next to me on the porch swing for a few minutes between conversations. She bumped my shoulder with hers. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, sweetheart. That Mom would have loved this." I looked out across my land, the shop, the gate, the neighbors on the porch, the horse sculpture, polished now and standing on a stone pedestal beside the front walk. "Yeah," I said, "she would have. If you've made it this far, do me one small favor. If you've ever been bullied by a fake HOA, a fake authority, or a fake jurisdiction, drop a line in the comments below and tell me about it. Tell us what happened. Tell us what you wish you had done. Someone reading this needs to hear your story. And if you want to see the next case, the one about the HOA treasurer who tried to seize a Korean War veteran's pickup and ended up in federal court, make sure you're subscribed. We post a new story every week. I'll see you on the next one.
If you boil this whole story down, what really happened is simple. Brittany Cole Whitfield didn't lose because Wesley got angry. She lost because Wesley kept recourse. For 3 full years, she scouted on the same thing every petty tyrant counts on, that the people she was bullying would get tired and start fighting. What she never understood is that a quiet man with a manila folder and a daughter to protect is more dangerous than any loud one. Every notice she sends became evidence. Every false complaint became a pattern. Every threat became proof. The lesson tucked inside this one it was saying out loud. If somebody is abusing fake authority over you, don't argue with them. Document them. File the public recourse request. Talk to your neighbors. Build the binder. The law does work, but it's work for the people who show up to it prepared. If you ever been bullied by an HOA or a fake jurisdiction of any kind, drop a comment and tell us about it. And if you want to see next week's story, the one about the HOA treasurer who tried to see a Korean War veteran pick up and ended up in federal court, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.